Ken, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm glad to be with you.
The Vanguard Group for Leadership, your company, helps senior leaders transform themselves and their organizations. What's an example of a leader who needed to transform himself or herself first in order to bring the needed change to the organization?
Oh, that's a great question. I probably wouldn't want to name the name because I haven't asked them about it, but I could give you a good example, which was the head of a very, very large functional unit in a big company had been seeking to change the way that function worked to make it more of a strategic role and less of a kind of reactive thing. So very common situation with functions in big organizations. And that individual initially thought it was more a matter of really telling everyone else that that's what needed to happen. And I think by working with him in this case, I think he came to realize pretty quickly that he needed to change the way he behaved in order to encourage the right ways of behaving among other people. And when I say behavior, it's, for example, going from someone who's more or less a order giver to more of a leading by listening type of approach, and also to take on board other people's points of view before making decisions. Lots of things that sound self-evident, but often don't happen. And so I think he was a quick, I wouldn't call it learner, a quick adapter to seeing that, his behavior mattered. And if he changed that, then other people would change as well. But if he didn't, then it would be very hard to get other people to do things he wasn't doing. So that's a really good example, I think. And the result of that was that the unit has become increasingly a strategic asset for the organization. And indeed, recently we did a survey, or I guess not a survey, more of like a dipstick questions to a bunch of other senior executives asking about how this function was working. And their answer was there were lots of things they could do better, but they were undoubtedly a strategic resource. And one of the nicest things they heard, or most rewarding, was that they wanted them at the table. Now, 2 years ago, no one would have thought of inviting them to the table. They would have sent them a message saying, here's what we need.
Right.
So that's a good example, I think.
How do you help leaders develop a meaningful sense of purpose?
Well, yes, I think on a good day, what we do is, first of all, they need to want to do that. I mean, it sounds obvious, but some organizations really don't particularly care about that. I think it's a big mistake because I think they lose a lot of potential performance. It's not just a nice to do, it's a way to focus everybody in your tent on what it is that matters most. And so that said, if you have a leader or leaders who do want to do this, we in fact just completed one segment of an assignment with a nonprofit to help to develop that concept of sense of purpose. And I think, I guess the best way to describe, or the best way we can describe it to leaders is it's the difference between what people do every day and why they do it. And if they have no why, except to get a paycheck or to get the day over with and go home, it's pretty likely that they're not going to be working as effectively as if they see a higher purpose. And I'm always reminded in this example of that famous story when I think it was JFK went to what became the JFK Space Center, but before it was called that, and he met the janitor sweeping out a closet somewhere in the place, and he asked that person what they do, and they said, "Mr. President, I'm sending people to the moon." So that's the that's really the point, is that if you create the right sense of purpose, people throughout the organization feel they own a piece of it. And the way to do it, I think, is not to impose it, obviously, for that reason. You want to develop it within the organization. Clearly not with some boundaries, but you start off with here's what I think we do in an important way for the world. What do you think about that? Perhaps bring in people from the front lines of the organization to ask them what they think about this. Probably change the whole wording and concept a great deal because of that, and you want to really demonstrate that you've done that so that everyone can clearly see that you are listening and taking on board their thinking about what the sense of purpose should be. And that could be a month-long process or even longer. You shouldn't rush it too much. This particular example I'm talking about, it's been about 2 months of work on it, not every day, but over a period of 2 months. And it started with the CEO and the chief of staff, and then it's percolated through the organization and then back up again. And it's really, I'd say, quite radically different from what we started with, which was a little more frankly, probably not, well, it wasn't as good. It was a bit kind of curse and not maybe very emotive, but it's become very emotive, particularly because this not-for-profit is in the world of providing health care for chronic problem. And so the meaning of this group to the people who receive its benefits is really very high. But the result was something that I think now becomes a kind of a rallying cry inside of why we're doing things the way we are, which is also a change process in the organization going on. And it's become as well, I think, the foundation for everything from relationships with the board through to external sources. And because it's a not-for-profit, they need to raise money. So this now becomes the elevator pitch, basically, for, someone says, well, why should we support you doing these, technical things, whatever it is you're doing? And the answer is, well, we're not doing these little technical things. We're changing the lives of people who benefit from us. And let me tell you how that works. The other thing I'd say about sense of purpose is it normally shouldn't stand alone. I think it then becomes a kind of a foundation for other aspects of a company culture, such as values and a sense of behaviors that you want to encourage. So you can hang a lot of good stuff off a really strong sense of purpose.
I've read a lot about, the millennials that seem to have a great sense of purpose going into a job. They don't want just a career, but they want to be part of a bigger meaning. Do you find that that's also with the baby boomers and older generation, more seasoned professionals?
I think so. I mean, I don't know what you think, but I think everybody wants that to really, it may be that the millennials are just more forceful about saying, we aren't going to put up without it. But I think that everybody's motivated by that. And also, it is funny, isn't it, Scott, everybody, once you're 2 generations ahead, you think this new generation is somehow really different. And I'm not so sure they're really as different as you think from what you were like when you were that age. It's a kind of a hard to pin down item, right? What were you like when you were essentially millennial? And I
Right.
think that I don't think they're that different, honestly, but I do think they're more forthright about certain things. And I think they've probably quite rightly gotten it right that, when you work for a company, that's not a person. So this idea that you're loyal to companies and companies are loyal to you is, I think, a big mythology. And I think they've definitely gotten rid of that one. I think they, if they think you're a good boss, they'll want to work with you, but they're not going to work with your company if it's not treating them well.
Right. Okay.
Which I think is very healthy.
I'm fascinated with the concept of roles, and that's where the title of the book and the podcast came from, All the Hats We Wear.
Yes.
Your company is called in usually when leaders are set to transition into a new role. So what's involved in that process?
Yeah, often it's really changing. It may be either a new role or it may be a change in the nature of the role. So for example, that instance I mentioned of a function changing how it worked was also in part a change in the role of the leader. Even though he stayed in the same chair, it became a very different kind of job. But the other kind of transition is certainly coming into a completely new company or a new business even. In my case, I've worked with a number of CEOs in the really challenging business of coming into a failing company to turn it around. And so, that's really the high pressure item. And it's high pressure. On the other hand, I wouldn't say that it's easy, but it's better than coming into a really successful company and being expected to improve it further. So it's coming into a failing situation. Sometimes everyone says, well, if this doesn't work out, no one could do it. And that's sometimes true. Nevertheless, the challenge is huge in terms of quickly assessing, I think, the environment honestly, and then assessing how you can fit into this in a positive way and bring about change. So I'd say the business of bringing top leaders into new roles or helping them into new roles is, I think, a combination of, in my case, being a good sounding board. So it's not as though I have a magic solution to problems, but sometimes I can be the person a CEO can talk to about how they see things and what do I think about that. And I can respond without it being a commentary on their leadership from someone who works for them directly, and it's not a commentary on their leadership from their board. So it's a kind of a safe space for CEOs, because it's quite remarkable, Scott, how few people there are that CEOs can talk to. They can't talk to their board about certain matters, or they'll be seen as weak. They can't talk to their direct reports, or it'll be seen as political. And they can't talk around their direct reports, or it'll be seen as, going around those leaders. So someone, not just me, but people who can play my role, play a very important important role, I think, in helping people at a senior level see themselves in a mirror. And also another very important thing is, I think, to give them some either reinforcing or honestly different feedback from people in their organization, because it's not always easy to get people 3 or 4 layers down in a big company. And I'm thinking here, 30 to 40,000 people globally. How do you really get their points of view across to the CEO in a way that is okay? They're not always going to just send you an email about it, and they're going to wait for your cues often. But someone like myself can come in and ask them, look, and I know that it's tough being the CEO. What do you think he or she should be doing differently or focusing on to make this thing successful? And then it's it's a much different question if they ask that question.
It seems to me that the trend in leadership is moving more towards humility and that sense of purpose. And I keep thinking of the Jim Collins concept of the level 5 leadership,
Mm-hmm.
where really you would think a hard charging, type A personality would be the most effective leader. But in fact, what he found was that the opposite was true. People that were very hard driving, but also equally as able to get advice or to give someone else the credit. What have you found in terms of that idea of humility in a leader?
Yeah, I think, Scott, that it's extremely important, and all of the best leaders that I've worked with or been on the team with have had that quality. At the same time, I would say that there are many ways to slice leadership, and so what I find very valuable is also the concept of situational leadership, and by that we mean that a really good leader, I think, today needs to be equipped with a number of different leadership styles. So, I think humility is probably always a good, that's almost not a style, that's a basic, just as is perhaps integrity and some other things, although obviously we've seen a number of leaders who manage to get away without integrity, but that's unfortunate. I don't think they get away with it for the long term, but they do get away with it. But in a good world, integrity and humility are becoming table stakes. But then I think what's really important is the ability to shift your leadership style to fit the situation. So, for example, if you're in a turnaround, which is essentially an extended crisis, everything's going wrong. It's sort of the pandemic of today. That's basically what a turnaround feels like. Is there's no end to the problems. You've got to kind of pick your battles and so forth. In that kind of situation, being sometimes being somewhat authoritarian or top down is necessary. You don't have time to ask everybody's opinion about what to do, and even if you did, they'd be all over the map, and it probably wouldn't help you anyway. So you've kind of got to go with your gut on those things and not, spend your time endlessly asking questions. On the other hand, at the other end of the spectrum, there are certain things that are so sensitive and are not time sensitive that you can afford to even have almost a consensus element. That's also pretty rare, where you really want everyone to not only understand, but to also be bought in. I think the sense of purpose is close to that, actually, because that's one of those things where you really want to have hammered, sort of passed it around so often that everyone had their fingers on it. That's relatively rare in top-level decision-making, though, but it is good to know when you can use that, particularly on some topic that's extremely sensitive or divisive. And one example that I remember very well was a leadership team that consisted of, it was crazy. It was various national and company factions all thrown together in this merger with really quite poisonous relationships between all these different groups. And then you had a board that was composed of factions of the same type. So it was a real hornet's nest of problems. And initially it made a lot of sense on certain issues to seek as close to consensus as you could get on critical matters like where should the headquarters be located or other things. Because if you didn't, it would come around and bite you with the board, and you'd have, the faction on the board that didn't want that to happen, screaming about how this was, violating all the principles of the merger. But if you could get at least many of that faction on your management team agreeing to the move, then it was obviously much easier to implement. So, and then there's all sorts of leadership styles in between, including, collegial management, which is a little more open than authoritative or authoritarian and so forth. So I think that today, the most important quality of great leaders is that characteristic of situational leadership. By contrast, it wasn't that long ago that we all supposedly admired the authoritarian leader, right? Jack Welch at GE. You didn't hear him asking people's opinions very often. I think that's over.
Hmm. Recently, I was reading about JFK and the Bay of Pigs in
Uh,
Cuba, and I was just amazed with his ability, with all the extreme pressures of everything that was going on there, to be able to still make decisions and listen to the team and everything that went with that.
yeah, I think being cool under fire is, I suppose, a very real practical aspect of great leadership. It's not a. I think people sometimes have the impression that really good leaders have a lot of leadership theories going on in their head, and they have a lot of, I'd say, sort of long-term, careful plans about how everything's going to look in 5 years. But when you get under the hood, I think it's a pretty crazy, frantic mess most of the time, and it's the fog of war situation, right? You don't really know where it's all going to go, but you still got to make decisions. And I think JFK in the Bay of Pigs was probably an interesting example of that. He was cool under pressure, but on the other hand, he made some bad decisions.
This is related to my next question here. I love the article on your website titled "How Expressing Ideas Can Make You a Better Leader." And the big takeaway for me was this idea of the clear ideas lead to clear actions. So how do you guide leaders to manage their emotions, use reflection, and be able to strategize and think clearly despite a lot of the moving parts?
Yeah, so I think that's a big challenge for anyone. I mean, it's not just leaders. We all have trouble articulating simple ideas around complex situations, but we all know that that's how you get the job done, right? Is to simplify the complex and also to make it understandable, and not only understandable, but an action motivating explanation. And so I think the best way really to help leaders do that is to have them see themselves in the shoes of the people who work for them, and really just ask the question: if we said it to them the way we have it written here, what would happen? And they'd probably say, you know what, I think they'd be confused. Or if you threw it back to someone to say, what would you do if this is someone, if your board said this to you, how would you react to that? And if they're honest, or they don't have to be honest, they just have to be kind of straightforward. They would say, yeah, that's that would either it would smack of not being sincere or actionable or understandable. So then we would work on how to make it more so. So I think that the best way for people to become better leaders in that way is to put themselves in the shoes of their people.
Switching gears a bit here in terms of productivity, what types of apps or software or programs do you recommend for the folks that you help to manage their personal productivity?
Gosh, I don't do much of that. I think probably because I don't know enough about it myself. But I think that, and it depends who it is. I mean, some of the people I've worked with are CEOs of very, very large companies in the tens of thousands of people around the world. They have people who can help them think about that, who specialize in management time. Also, as you get into bigger and bigger companies, you don't have as many choices about what you use. You kind of get this is how your calendar is going to be run. The other aspect of it too is that at a certain level, someone's running it for you anyway. I mean, one of the people I work with had 4 secretaries, and he could have run his own calendar, but I mean, that was just not a productive use of his time. So I don't think he ever saw the technology. He just heard what he was supposed to do each day. And it was quite amusing. He actually, and very effective, he had his lead secretary created a bright orange piece of paper every day that was basically his schedule. And he just carried that around with him. And, how high tech is that? But, it worked. And if he lost it, everyone knew where it went, he could find it. And so anyway, that was so much for technology. On the other hand, I think for smaller organizations and, CEOs or just senior people in smaller companies, they obviously have to handle a lot of this stuff themselves. And I think I really think it depends a great deal on people's, state in life. I mean, people who are over, say, 40 probably need someone, who's around 20 to help them just figure out which thing it should be. And, because you've got, 50 or 100 different calendarizing options and so forth. People under that age basically figure it out for themselves. And then, of course, usually it needs to be synchronized with everyone else. So typically, let's say you're starting up a small company and you have initially 5 people and maybe eventually it's 20. most likely you're going to kind of impose the technology that you like because that's where you started. And if you had everyone on different platforms, it would be chaos, or it could be chaos. I guess it's doable, but it's not great. In fact, in my own tiny little organization, we have different people on some different platforms, and it's not the greatest. I mean, you got to get interfaces and things like that. But I think the long and the short of it is it's generational. So if you're over 40, I would recommend finding someone a lot younger to help you figure it out. And if you're under that age, you probably got it worked out already.
What's your process for consuming the news each day?
I wake up whenever I wake up, and the first thing I do is I look at the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. Not all of it, but just kind of the front page of those publications. And I don't know about you, but I find the Wall Street Journal is pretty balanced on its editorial pages, but with a bit of a business twist to it. The New York Times is great in many ways, but it's kind of New York centric. I mean, it's one of those classic things. They'd have if there was a nuclear explosion in Japan, it would be, 5 New Yorkers lost, Japan destroyed, right? That would be how they would do it. And then the FT is the best of them all, I think, honestly. It's just such a balanced, kind of global look. And I mean, when they make a comment about what's going on in the US, you really pay attention because, they think it's important. It's not just, home news. And so those are the 3 things I look at. And then and sometimes I'll look at Google News as well, but that can be an endless Sargasso sea of, once you get in, you don't come out again. But those 3 things are what I typically do. And I guess the benefit of that is, I mean, I don't know, it's not really maybe very useful for my work always, but it's just, it's just kind of valuable for me to kind of get grounded in what's going on out there. I don't know what you find with other people you talk with, but those are the 3 that I choose.
What types of books do you like to read?
Oh gosh, all over the place. I would like to read more of them than I do, but I read everything from crime fiction to also some management stuff. But I don't. I'm not that big on management books. I'm sure that's a big heresy, but I'm more interested in kind of quick, clear. Well, as you were discussing earlier, clear ideas conveyed simply. And so I find a lot of management books have like one idea that they're beating you over the head with for 250 pages. So I typically read the Harvard Business Review, and I find that's a great resource. I think that might be I might like them partly because I write with them a lot, but but no, I really do think that even if I didn't, I would read it. And then let's see, what else do I read? I do read a lot of magazine versus book literature. So I read The Economist quite a lot, not cover to cover, but selectively. And I read The Week, which is always a kind of a sort of selective view of what's going on around the world. And then let's see, from real book reading, I do like reading historical pieces and historical novels. Right now, I'm in the middle of a book by Simon Jenkins about the history of England, which is excellent. It's a 600-page book on the history of England, which must be the shortest one ever written. And it's great. So I enjoy that kind of stuff too.
Great. What's a hobby you enjoy that most people may be surprised about?
Well, I don't know if they'd be surprised, but probably my main hobby is backcountry skiing, so wilderness skiing. So I do a lot of the, the classic climb up, whatever it may be, on skins, and then take them off and ski down the other side. I'm not crazy. I'm crazy, but not too crazy. I don't do that on my own. I do it with a guide always. But it's great. I love it. It's kind of like wilderness hiking with a thrill element as well. And it's something I do in the US and I do in Europe a lot as well. In fact, I've been skiing in certain parts of Europe probably now for 20 years, doing that type of skiing. And it's a lot of, it's probably like any sport. It's very relaxing in its own way. It kind of takes your mind off other things.
Besides your occupation, what are some of the other hats you wear?
Oh, you mean in addition to the Vanguard program? What else
Yeah.
do I do? Well, I do a lot of sailing. That's actually another hobby. So I'm actually out on Shelter Island right now, and we do a lot of sailing from here. So I guess that qualifies as a sort of a hobby or a problem, depending on how you look at it. It's a money pit, that's for sure. And then I also do I do several board roles. So I'm the co-chair of a group called Community Solutions, which is probably the one and only not-for-profit focused on solving homelessness. There are a lot of organizations that do good things to try to help with homelessness, but this organization is focused on really changing the game so that people don't become homeless, or if they do, it stops, and making a lot of progress. It's a really remarkable organization. I'm also on the board of the White Institute in New York, which is a psychiatric institute. It's one of a kind, really, for training psychiatrists and also providing psychiatric care to people who are can't afford the full whack, so they get free or low cost psychiatric treatment. And then at the other end of the spectrum, I'm also on the board of a very cool little arts company that does called Parallel Exit. And Parallel Exit is one of the one and only organizations in the U.S. that does physical theater. So it's sort of nonverbal theater. So I guess it's probably like a little bit like Charlie Chaplin. Not always so slapstick, though. It can be also quite emotive, but that's what they do. And so, yeah, it's kind of a wide array of things, but all of those things interest me a lot.
I know you went to I know you went to Amherst College and in
Yes.
Massachusetts. So the big question is, are you a Red Sox fan or Yankees now that you're living in New York City?
Well, I'm not so much of a baseball person, but I guess I'm a Yankees observer, I guess. I'm not too much, a fan is maybe putting it too strongly, but I've been to a few Yankees games. I suppose that's but that's really mainly just from proximity. But what about you?
You know, I'm more of a Celtics fan, basketball
Mhm,
than
mhm.
baseball.
Yeah,
So
because of course you went to college just across the road from me. So
yes, UMass Amherst, and they
yeah,
had a
yeah.
great basketball. They were in the Final Four. They were in the championships against Rick Pitino's Kentucky.
Oh, how cool is that? Yeah, no, I used to, as a footnote, did a couple of courses over at UMass, because the five colleges system had courses at all those colleges. And so I spent some time there as well as you did at Amherst, I guess, with music.
I wonder, do you think that this pandemic is going to eternally change college and how, like it seems like there a lot of learning is going on virtually and it seems to be going okay. And it just seems like a great way to cut a lot of the expenses of expansive, buildings and campuses. What do you think the net change will be from the pandemic on colleges?
Yeah, well, I could probably make a lot of money if I knew the answer to that, but I think I I kind of see it more as something that's accelerating an existing trend, toward some forms of distance learning that have been developing already. But it's sort of, kind of accelerated that, in a huge way, just as it has in business, right? I mean, Zoom meetings, I'm doing, a couple a day now, and I probably did none a year ago, but Zoom was more or less was there. We just weren't using it so much. So I think it'll be used for some purposes, but, I also think that there's a huge amount of importance around the human element in teaching and in learning. And it's an expensive thing to do, but I think it's a valuable thing. And, the things you learn by working and having a seminar with people is so much greater than just, filling in a form or doing a multiple choice test on something. On the other hand, what it might do is it might unfortunately increase the inequities or inequalities in education because, can everyone afford this way of learning? Maybe not. And I don't know how to think about it. On one hand, it's going to be a kind of a flight to quality in that area. In other words, I think the really expensive education is going to be really worth it because of that interactive element, the human sort of tutorial piece with your professor and so forth. On the other hand, it probably means that a lot of pretty good but not great colleges are going to get lost. I mean, where sort of similar idea, but not maybe that same high level of teaching. And I don't know if that's good or not. But I could see how that could happen. You'd still have a cadre of very established colleges that teach people in a sort of old-fashioned way that's very, very valuable, but that they can't afford to do that for everyone, and that we'll find there's a lot less liberal arts education running around and a lot more technical learning for people who are really wanting to be technical professionals. That could be what happens. And it might be, though, too, that even the very expensive colleges are going to have to find ways to be less expensive because it's really quite insane. I mean, people are kind of literally mortgaging their homes to put their children through school. It doesn't seem sustainable.
Sometimes I wonder too with colleges and the better colleges that the networking and the people that you meet and the connections seems to be a huge draw too. I even had a similar experience going to UMass for music. It was a wonderful program. but it was Amherst College that had Wynton Marsalis, speak to 10 kids.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely not. I don't know how you figure out how to make that as equitable as you can. Certainly, one way to do it though is to make sure that those types of experiences are much more egalitarian in terms of who can attend more on the basis of merit than just who their parents were or whatever. I mean, when I was at Amherst, it was basically what was literally a white male college. I was there as one of the first we had some of the first women students when I joined. And so the whole thing was just, you just took it for granted that that's the way it ran. But now it's become a highly multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-everything place. And I'm sure I would not even have a chance of getting in there anymore. I mean, the number of white Anglo-Saxon men at Amherst College now is, probably you could count them on two hands.
Right. Well, my final question, Ken, is what's one powerful action step our listeners can take to help them live a more joyful, productive, and fulfilling life?
Well, to my mind, and this is probably hardly a breakthrough idea, I do think it is to just work more on being self-aware, which is, I think, different than meditating or doing other things. It's really just taking a look at yourself and thinking about what your competencies are and where you need other people to help you do things. Also to, kind of think about your own, not just leadership style, but your style period. How do you come off with other people? Are you, always the one who's talking in a conversation? That's probably not a good thing. Are you a good listener? That's probably is a good thing. But, to be consciously thinking about those things, I think is a very productive exercise. And I must say, for my first X years of life, I surely did not practice that very much. I just kind of thought that whatever I thought and did was probably just fine. And then it slowly dawned on me that maybe not. And so it's I'm sure you found it too. It's a very valuable exercise, and probably none of us do it enough.
Very nice. Well, Ken, this has been a real pleasure. I think, you've given a lot of ideas for our listeners to think about and to learn. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me with you. It's been really interesting.
This is the All the Hats We Wear podcast. It's great to have you here. This show will teach you the time management skills you need to be joyful, productive, and fulfilled. This is episode 35, and we have a special guest, the very talented Ken Banta. Ken Banta is the founder and principal of the Vanguard Group for Leadership. His team helped lead the transformational turnarounds of Pharmacia, Shearing Plow, and Bosch & Lomb, with a focus on building strong leadership in dynamic new cultures. This work and related work by Ken and his seasoned team with other companies across biotech, tech, and biopharma give Vanguard exceptional capabilities to help build top-level leadership and drive organizational change. You're meant to do great things. If you want to be an innovator and visionary, you have to manage your busy life like one. The All the Hats We Wear planner is the planner for the future. I want to give you a free month of the planner to try out for yourself. Nothing will slip through the cracks anymore. When you use the All the Hats We Wear planner, you'll have everything you need at your fingertips. All of your goals, a vision statement, a list of daily habits, and a checklist to track your progress. Key information for the small and large projects on your plate. Daily sheets to clarify your top outcomes for each day. A week at a glance section to plan for the coming weeks, and much more. The All the Hats We Wear planner will be your roadmap to a more joyful, productive, and fulfilling life. To claim your free month so you can see for yourself how it will streamline your busy life, visit allthehatswewear.com.